Jungkook, what are you doing here? Jimin's voice froze in the doorway. For a second, nobody moved. Not Jungkook, not Taehyung, not even the air inside the room. The look on Jimin's face said everything. Shock, betrayal, and something even worse. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what you're about to hear is one of the most shocking hidden stories that was never meant to reach the public. And if you love intense BTS drama stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Now tell me honestly, if you were Jimin, what would you do after opening that door? Because one decision made that night destroyed everything between 7 people who once called each other family. The night started like any other. At least, that's what Jimin believed. The members had finished a long schedule, everyone was exhausted, and nobody expected trouble. But sometimes, the biggest disasters begin during the quietest moments. Jimin wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to see what he saw, and he definitely wasn't supposed to discover the secret Jungkook and Taehyung had been hiding for months. A secret so dangerous that RM, Jin, Suga, and J-Hope would soon be forced to choose sides. By sunrise, friendships would crack, loyalties would be tested, and one member would make a decision that nobody could ever take back. And it all started with a single door slowly opening in the middle of the night. Jimin stood frozen at the doorway. His hand was still gripping the door handle while his eyes remained locked on Jungkook and Taehyung sitting together on the bed. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The silence was so heavy it felt impossible to breathe. Jungkook's face lost all color. Taehyung immediately stood up. "Jimin, wait," Taehyung said. But Jimin stepped backward before he could finish. "Don't." His voice was low, dangerous. "Don't say a single word." The room instantly became colder. Jungkook finally stood from the bed. "This isn't what you think." Jimin laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh people make when something inside them starts breaking. "Really?" he asked. "Then tell me what I'm supposed to think." Jungkook opened his mouth, but no words came out. For months, Jimin had ignored strange feelings, the secret meetings, the sudden disappearances, the conversations that stopped whenever he entered a room. Every time he questioned it, he convinced himself he was overthinking, because these were his friends, his family, the people he trusted more than anyone. But now, standing in that doorway, every strange moment suddenly made sense, and that realization hurt more than anything. Taehyung took a step forward. "Let us explain." "Explain what?" Jimin snapped. "Explain why you both lied to me?" His eyes moved from Taehyung to Jungkook. "Or explain how long you've been hiding this?" Jungkook's jaw tightened. He looked guilty, and that expression alone felt like a knife to Jimin's chest. Because Jungkook wasn't denying it. He wasn't fighting back. He was just standing there, silent. Jimin shook his head. Unbelievable. Then he turned around and walked away. "Jimin!" Jungkook called after him, but Jimin didn't stop. He didn't even look back. The hallway stretched endlessly as he walked faster and faster. His heartbeat pounded inside his ears. Anger, confusion, betrayal, all of it mixed together until he couldn't tell which emotion hurt the most. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Jungkook was following him. "Jimin, stop!" Jungkook grabbed his arm. Jimin immediately pulled away. "Don't touch me." The words came out sharper than intended. Jungkook froze. For a brief second, genuine pain flashed across his face. But Jimin didn't care. "Not anymore. You should have thought about this before lying to me." Jungkook looked down. "I never wanted to hurt you." "That's funny." Jimin's voice trembled, "because that's exactly what happened." Another silence followed. Jungkook seemed desperate to explain something, yet every time he tried speaking, he stopped himself, as if there was another secret buried underneath the first. and that made Jimin even angrier. What else aren't you telling me? Jungkook looked away. That single reaction was enough. There was definitely more. Much more. Before Jungkook could answer, another voice interrupted them. "What's going on?" RM appeared from the opposite hallway. He looked confused. Then he noticed their expressions. His face immediately changed. The leader had seen enough conflicts to recognize disaster when it appeared. "Jimin?" RM asked carefully. "What happened?" Jimin stared at RM. For a second, he considered telling everything, exposing the entire situation right there. But then he noticed something strange. RM wasn't surprised. Not completely. There was tension in his face, a tension that looked familiar, almost like someone expecting bad news that had finally arrived. And then a terrible possibility entered Jimin's mind. "You knew." RM blinked. "What?" "You knew," Jimin repeated. His voice grew colder. "Didn't you?" RM didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation said everything. Jimin's heart sank. Wow. RM tried stepping forward. "Jimin, listen." "No." Jimin backed away. "How many people knew?" RM remained silent. "How many?" Jimin demanded. Another pause. Then RM finally spoke. "More than you think." Those 4 words shattered whatever hope Jimin still had, because this wasn't just about Jungkook and Taehyung anymore. This was about everyone, the entire group, the entire family he trusted. Suddenly, every smile felt fake, every conversation felt suspicious, every memory felt poisoned. Jimin looked at Jungkook, then at RM. "You all lied to me." Nobody answered, because nobody could deny it. And in that moment, Jimin made a decision, one that would change everything before the night was over.
Jimin didn't go to his room. He didn't go outside. Instead, he headed toward the private studio where the members usually escaped when they needed space. The building was almost silent at that hour, but inside his head everything was loud. Every memory, every conversation. Every moment Jungkook had looked away when Jimin asked a simple question. He slammed the studio door shut and dropped into a chair. His hands were shaking, not because he was scared, because he was angry. For years, Jimin had been the one who noticed when people were hurting, the one who stayed behind after schedules to make sure everyone was okay, the one who listened, the one who sacrificed. Yet somehow he had become the last person to know what was happening around him. That realization burned. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. Jimin didn't need to look up to know who it was. "Go away, Jungkook." Silence. "I'm serious." Still silence. Finally, Jungkook spoke. "I can't." Jimin laughed bitterly. "You couldn't tell me the truth either." Jungkook walked closer. "You don't understand." "Then explain it." Jimin stood up immediately. "Explain why everyone knew except me." Jungkook's expression hardened. "Because it wasn't that simple." "Simple?" Jimin repeated. "You lied to my face for months." Jungkook clenched his fists. "I was trying to protect you." Jimin stared at him. Then he laughed again, even harder this time. "Protect me?" He shook his head. "That's the worst excuse I've ever heard." Jungkook looked frustrated, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. "You think this was easy for me?" Jimin stepped forward. "No. I think you made your choice a long time ago." The words landed harder than either of them expected. Jungkook immediately looked away, and that reaction was enough to make Jimin's stomach drop. Because for the first time, Jimin realized this wasn't recent. Whatever was happening had started much earlier than he imagined. "How long?" Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook remained silent. "How long?" Jungkook closed his eyes. "Months." The answer felt like a punch. Months. Not days, not weeks. Months. Entire seasons had passed while everyone else carried a secret around him. Jimin suddenly remembered canceled plans, late-night meetings, private conversations. Everything connected together like pieces of a puzzle he never wanted to solve. "Months," he repeated. And nobody thought I deserved the truth. Jungkook looked at him directly. It wasn't about what you deserved. Then what was it about? Jungkook hesitated again. There it was. Another wall. Another secret. JIMIN noticed it immediately. You're still hiding something. JIMIN, tell me. Jungkook's jaw tightened. I can't. The answer exploded whatever patience JIMIN had left. Then get out. Jungkook didn't move. Get out. Please listen. Get out. The studio echoed with JIMIN's voice. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jungkook slowly nodded. The disappointment in his eyes was obvious, but JIMIN refused to feel guilty. Jungkook turned and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he stopped. When the truth comes out, he said quietly, you're going to hate all of us. Then he left. The door closed. JIMIN stood completely still. Those words lingered in the room long after Jungkook disappeared. You're going to hate all of us. Not me, not TAEHYUNG, all of us. That meant the secret was bigger than he thought, much bigger. His phone suddenly vibrated. A message appeared. It was from Jin. We need to talk. Now. JIMIN stared at the screen. Another member. Another conversation. Another person apparently involved in whatever nightmare this had become. He almost ignored it. But curiosity won. 10 minutes later, he entered one of the empty meeting rooms. Jin was already there waiting. Unlike RM and Jungkook, Jin looked nervous. Really nervous. Thanks for coming, Jin said. JIMIN crossed his arms. Just tell me the truth. Jin exhaled heavily. I wish it were that easy. Stop saying that, JIMIN snapped. Everyone keeps saying that. Jin looked down. Because it is complicated. Then, uncomplicated. The older member stayed quiet for several seconds. Then he finally spoke. The thing you saw tonight isn't the real problem. JIMIN frowned. What? Jin looked directly at him. What you saw is only the beginning. A chill ran down JIMIN's spine. For the first time that night, fear started replacing anger. Because Jin wasn't speaking like someone caught in a misunderstanding. He was speaking like someone preparing for a disaster. What aren't you telling me? JIMIN asked. Jin swallowed. There was an agreement. An agreement? Between the members. JIMIN's eyes widened. What agreement? Jin looked genuinely conflicted, as if revealing the answer would trigger consequences he couldn't control. Finally, he said 4 words. To keep you away. The room fell silent. JIMIN felt his heartbeat stop. Keep you away. Not protect. Not help. Keep away. Suddenly, everything felt different. Darker. More deliberate. And for the first time, JIMIN began wondering whether the betrayal wasn't about Jungkook and TAEHYUNG at all. Maybe he had been focusing on the wrong secret the entire time. Maybe the real question wasn't what they were hiding. Maybe the real question was why the entire group had decided to hide it from him specifically. And the answer to that question was something JIMIN wasn't prepared to hear. JIMIN didn't answer immediately. He simply stared at Jin as if waiting for him to take the words back. But Jin didn't. The older member sat there silently, looking more exhausted than JIMIN had ever seen him. Keep me away? JIMIN finally repeated. What does that even mean? Jin rubbed his face. It means exactly what it sounds like. No, JIMIN shook his head. No, you're not going to say something like that and then stop talking. His voice became sharper. Explain it. Jin looked toward the window. For several seconds, he seemed to be debating whether he should continue. Then he let out a long breath. A few months ago, something happened. JIMIN frowned. What happened? Jin hesitated. Not yet. JIMIN immediately stood up. Are you serious? Listen first. No. JIMIN pointed toward the door. I'm tired of everyone giving me half the story. Jin looked frustrated. Because nobody knows how to tell you the full story. Try me. The room became silent again. Finally, Jin nodded. Fine. He leaned forward. Do you remember the overseas schedule last winter? JIMIN instantly remembered it. It had been one of the busiest periods they had experienced in years. Endless travel, endless cameras, endless pressure. What about it? Jin's expression darkened. Something happened during that trip. JIMIN's stomach tightened. What? Jungkook got into trouble. JIMIN blinked. What kind of trouble? Jin looked directly at him. The kind that could have ended everything. The answer hit harder than expected. JUNGKOOK was usually careful, responsible. If Jin was describing it like that, then whatever happened must have been serious. Why didn't I hear about it? JIMIN asked. Jin laughed bitterly. Because that's exactly the point. JIMIN stared at him. What are you talking about? Jin lowered his voice. The members made sure you never found out. Another wave of anger surged through JIMIN. Why? Jin opened his mouth, then stopped. Because. He looked away. Because JUNGKOOK asked us to. JIMIN froze. For the first time since entering the room, he genuinely didn't know what to think. JUNGKOOK? The same JUNGKOOK who claimed he was protecting him? The same JUNGKOOK who couldn't even explain himself tonight? Why would he do that? Jin remained silent. That silence was becoming a pattern. Every answer created 3 more questions. Jimin's patience was disappearing. Tell me. Jin looked conflicted. He thought it was the only way. The only way for what? Jin finally met his eyes. To stop you from getting involved. Jimin laughed. Not because it was funny, because nothing made sense anymore. Getting involved in what? Before Jin could answer, the meeting room door suddenly opened. Both men turned. Suga stood there. His expression immediately told them he had heard enough. I knew this was a bad idea, Suga muttered. Jin looked annoyed. He's already finding out. Not like this. Suga walked inside and closed the door behind him. The atmosphere instantly changed. Unlike RM and Jin, Suga wasn't nervous. He looked worried, deeply worried. How much did you tell him? Suga asked. Jin remained quiet. Enough, Jimin answered before Jin could speak. Suga sighed heavily. Then we're running out of time. Jimin narrowed his eyes. Time for what? Suga exchanged a glance with Jin, a glance that lasted barely a second. But Jimin noticed it. They were hiding something again. Stop doing that. Jimin's voice rose. Stop looking at each other like I'm not standing here. Suga looked directly at him. We're trying to prevent another disaster. Another? Jimin immediately caught the word. Another disaster? Suga cursed under his breath. Jin closed his eyes. Neither man looked happy. What disaster? Jimin demanded. Suga didn't answer. Instead, he asked a question. When was the last time you talked to TAEHYUNG? Jimin frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Answer me. Jimin thought for a moment. A few days ago. Suga nodded slowly. And did he seem okay? Jimin hesitated. The truth was, no. TAEHYUNG had seemed distracted recently, more distant than usual, but Jimin assumed it was stress. They were all stressed. Not really. Suga looked down. That's what I thought. A strange feeling formed in Jimin's chest. Something about the way Suga was speaking felt wrong. Not defensive, not guilty, afraid. What happened to TAEHYUNG? Jimin asked quietly. Suga didn't respond immediately. Then he finally said something that changed the entire direction of the conversation. The secret isn't about JUNGKOOK. Jimin stared at him. What? Not really. Suga folded his arms. JUNGKOOK became involved later. Jimin felt his pulse quicken. Then who is this about? Suga looked toward the door as if checking whether anyone else was listening. When he turned back, his expression was completely serious. TAEHYUNG. The room suddenly felt smaller. Jimin remembered the look on TAEHYUNG's face earlier. The panic, the fear, the desperation. It hadn't looked like someone caught hiding a simple secret. It had looked like someone terrified of being exposed. What about TAEHYUNG? Jimin asked. Suga's answer came slowly. A few months ago, TAEHYUNG discovered something. What? Another pause, another hesitation. Then Suga spoke the words that immediately sent a chill through Jimin's entire body. Something about someone inside the group. Jimin's eyes widened. Who? Suga looked directly at him. That's the problem. The silence that followed was unbearable. Because for the first time all night, Jimin realized the secret might not just threaten friendships. It might threaten the entire group itself. And if that was true, then whatever TAEHYUNG discovered months ago was powerful enough to make 6 people lie to one person they cared about. Powerful enough to divide them. Powerful enough to destroy them. And Jimin still had no idea that he was standing closer to the center of that secret than anyone else. The words hung in the air long after Suga finished speaking. Jimin sat completely still. His mind was trying to connect pieces that refused to fit together. Taehyung had discovered something. JUNGKOOK became involved later. The members created an agreement. Everyone hid the truth from him. None of it made sense, yet somehow, all of it felt connected. "Tell me exactly what Taehyung found," Jimin said. Suga immediately shook his head. "I can't." Jimin slammed his hand against the table. "Then why am I even here?" The sound echoed across the room. Jin flinched. Suga remained calm, but the tension in his face became more obvious. "Because, whether we like it or not, you're already involved now." Jimin stared at him. "I was involved the second you all decided to lie to me." Neither Jin nor Suga argued with that. Because they couldn't. Deep down, they knew he was right. The betrayal had started long before tonight. Long before the hotel room. Long before Jimin opened that door and saw something he wasn't supposed to see. The damage had been building for months, and now it was finally reaching the surface. Suga leaned back in his chair. "You want the truth?" Jimin nodded immediately. "Then understand something first." His voice became serious. "Not everyone lied because they wanted to." Jimin laughed bitterly. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No." Suga's eyes hardened. "It's supposed to make you understand how bad the situation actually became." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Jin quietly added, "There were arguments." Jimin looked toward him. "Arguments?" Jin nodded. "Big ones." A strange feeling formed in Jimin's stomach. Between who? Jin exchanged another glance with Suga. "Everyone." Jimin frowned. "What do you mean, everyone?" Suga answered this time. The group split apart. Jimin froze. "What?" "Not publicly," Suga said. "Nobody outside knew." He looked exhausted just remembering it, but there were nights when we could barely stay in the same room. Jimin stared at him in disbelief. This was impossible. BTS had survived things that should have broken them years ago. Pressure, fame, rumors, exhaustion. Yet now Suga was describing something worse, something internal, something hidden. "Why?" Jimin asked quietly. Suga hesitated, then he spoke. "Because nobody could agree on what to do with the secret." The room suddenly felt colder. Jimin's heart began beating faster again. "What kind of secret causes that?" Suga didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked directly into Jimin's eyes. "The kind that hurts someone no matter what choice you make." Jimin opened his mouth to respond, but his phone suddenly vibrated. Every person in the room looked toward it. The screen lit up. One name appeared. Taehyung. Silence immediately filled the room. Jin looked nervous. Suga looked concerned. Jimin looked at the phone for several seconds before answering. "What?" His voice came out colder than intended. On the other side, Taehyung sounded completely different from earlier. Not defensive, not angry, scared. "Where are you?" Jimin frowned. "Why?" Another pause. Then Taehyung said something unexpected. "You need to leave." Everyone in the room reacted instantly. Suga stood up. Jin's face lost color. Jimin's pulse spiked. "What are you talking about?" Taehyung lowered his voice. "Just trust me." "Trust you?" Jimin almost laughed. "After tonight? Please." The desperation in Taehyung's voice was impossible to ignore. "Just leave before he gets there." Every instinct inside Jimin immediately activated. "Who?" Taehyung didn't answer. "Taehyung, you don't understand." His breathing sounded uneven now. "Everything is happening too fast." Jimin looked toward Suga and Jin. Both members appeared alarmed, more alarmed than they had looked all night. "Who is coming?" Jimin demanded. For several seconds, only silence came through the phone. Then Taehyung whispered one sentence. "The person who started all of this." The call ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Jimin slowly lowered the phone. His heart was pounding so hard it almost hurt. "The person who started all of this." The words echoed endlessly inside his head. Suga immediately grabbed his own phone. "That's not good." Jin stood up. "Did something happen?" Suga's expression darkened. "I think the timeline just changed." Jimin looked between them. "What does that mean?" Suga didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the door. It means somebody made a move first. Before anyone could stop him, he opened the door. The hallway outside looked empty. For exactly 2 seconds. Then footsteps echoed from somewhere down the corridor. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. Every person inside the room went silent. Jin's face turned pale. Suga's jaw tightened. JIMIN instinctively stood. The footsteps continued approaching. One step, then another, then another. Whoever was coming wasn't in a hurry. Almost as if they already knew everyone inside was waiting. The sound stopped directly outside the door. Nobody breathed. Then came 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. And in that moment, JIMIN realized that everything he had learned tonight was only the beginning. Because the person standing outside that door wasn't part of the story he thought he was uncovering. They were the reason the story existed in the first place. And once that door opened, there would be no way for any of them to go back. The 3 knocks echoed through the room like a warning. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. JIMIN could feel the tension spreading across the air. Whatever confidence Suga had shown earlier was gone. Jin looked genuinely worried, and that frightened JIMIN more than anything, because Jin was usually the calmest person during a crisis. If even he looked shaken, then the situation was far worse than JIMIN realized. Another knock came, slower this time, as if the person outside knew exactly what effect they were having. Suga finally stepped forward. "Stay here." JIMIN immediately shook his head. "No, JIMIN, no." His voice became firm. "I'm done being kept in the dark." For a second, Suga looked ready to argue. Then he stopped himself, because there was no point anymore. The secret was already collapsing. Suga slowly reached for the handle. The room fell completely silent. Then the door opened. Standing outside was J-Hope. JIMIN blinked. Jin blinked. Even Suga looked surprised. J-Hope stared at all 3 of them before letting out a breath. "Good. You're all together." Nobody spoke. The tension didn't disappear. If anything, it became stranger. "What happened?" Jin asked. J-Hope entered the room and immediately locked the door behind him. "RM called me." Suga frowned. "About what?" J-Hope looked directly at JIMIN. "About him." JIMIN folded his arms. "Can somebody explain why everyone keeps acting like I'm the center of some secret meeting?" J-Hope's expression changed. A flash of guilt appeared across his face. Then it vanished. "Because you are." The answer landed heavily. JIMIN stared at him. "What?" J-Hope rubbed the back of his neck. "That's what we've been trying to avoid." JIMIN felt frustration building again. Then stopped talking in circles. J-Hope looked toward Suga. Then Jin. Neither member interrupted. Finally, J-Hope sat down. "Do you remember 6 months ago?" JIMIN frowned. "6 months ago when?" "When you almost left." The room instantly went silent. JIMIN froze. So did everyone else. Because that wasn't a memory they talked about. Ever. 6 months earlier had been one of the lowest periods of JIMIN's life. Exhaustion, pressure, endless expectations. He had reached a point where everything felt overwhelming. Nobody outside the group knew how difficult that period had been. Yet somehow J-Hope had just dragged it back into the room. "Why are you bringing that up?" JIMIN asked quietly. J-Hope hesitated. "Because that's when this started." The words hit like a shockwave. JIMIN stared at him. "No." J-Hope nodded slowly. "Yes." JIMIN's stomach tightened. Everything suddenly felt wrong. "What does that have to do with JUNGKOOK and TAEHYUNG?" J-Hope exchanged a glance with Suga. "More than you think." JIMIN sat down slowly. For the first time all night, uncertainty began replacing anger. Because if this secret really connected to that period of his life, then maybe he had been looking in the wrong direction from the beginning. "Explain." J-Hope exhaled. "After that period, JUNGKOOK changed." JIMIN frowned. "Changed how?" He became obsessed. Nobody spoke after that sentence. The word itself sounded dangerous. Obsession. Not concern, not friendship. Obsession. JIMIN looked toward Suga. Then Jin. Neither corrected J-Hope, which meant they agreed. "Obsessed with what?" JIMIN asked. J-Hope answered immediately. "Protecting you." The room felt smaller. Jimin stared at him in disbelief. "That's ridiculous." "I wish it was." J-Hope leaned forward. "At first, nobody thought much about it. We all care about each other. That's normal." He paused, but JUNGKOOK took it further. Jimin remembered countless moments over the previous months. JUNGKOOK checking whether he had eaten. JUNGKOOK staying behind after schedules. JUNGKOOK noticing problems before anyone else did. At the time, it felt normal. Now those memories looked different. Much different. "What are you saying?" Jimin asked. J-Hope's answer came quietly. "I'm saying JUNGKOOK stopped making rational decisions." Silence followed. Jimin couldn't process it. Not because it was impossible, because it explained too much. Suddenly, every strange interaction returned to him. Every protective reaction, every argument JUNGKOOK started whenever someone pushed Jimin too hard. Every moment he seemed unable to stay away. "No," Jimin whispered. "You're wrong." But even as he said it, doubt appeared. J-Hope looked sad. "I wish I was." Then the door suddenly opened again. This time, nobody had touched it. Every person in the room jumped to their feet. The handle turned slowly. The door moved, and RM stepped inside. His face immediately told them something had happened, something serious. "Where's TAEHYUNG?" Suga asked. RM looked directly at him. "Gone." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Jimin felt his pulse spike. "What do you mean, gone?" RM's expression darkened. "He left." "Left where?" Jin asked. RM shook his head. "Nobody knows." A terrible silence followed. Then RM said the one thing nobody expected to hear. And JUNGKOOK went after him. The room exploded into confusion. J-Hope stood immediately. "When?" 10 minutes ago. Suga cursed under his breath. Jin looked stunned. Jimin felt a strange coldness spread through his chest. Because despite everything that had happened tonight, one fact remained undeniable. TAEHYUNG was running from something. JUNGKOOK was chasing him. And whatever secret connected the two of them had finally escaped everyone's control. The problem was that Jimin still didn't know whether JUNGKOOK was trying to save TAEHYUNG or stop him before he revealed the truth to everyone. And somewhere out there, TAEHYUNG was carrying an answer that could destroy everything they had left. Nobody wasted another second. The meeting room that had been filled with secrets moments earlier suddenly became a command center. RM pulled out his phone while Suga immediately started calling TAEHYUNG. No answer. Jin tried JUNGKOOK. Straight to voicemail. J-Hope paced across the room, clearly trying to stay calm. Jimin stood in the middle of all of it, feeling more lost than ever. The people around him knew pieces of the truth. Maybe all of it, but every answer only revealed a bigger mystery. "Someone tell me what's happening," Jimin said. RM looked up from his phone. "We're trying." "No," Jimin shook his head. "Not that. The truth." RM's expression hardened. "This isn't the time." "Then when is the time?" Jimin snapped. "After another person disappears?" Nobody answered, because nobody had an answer. RM looked exhausted. More exhausted than Jimin had seen him in years. The burden of leadership was visible on his face. Whatever he had been carrying for months was finally crushing him. "We had rules," RM finally said. The room fell silent. Suga stopped dialing. Jin looked away. J-Hope closed his eyes. Jimin immediately noticed the reaction. "Rules?" RM nodded slowly. "After everything started falling apart." "What rules?" Jimin asked. RM hesitated. Then he answered. "Rule number 1. Nobody tells you anything." Jimin felt his stomach drop. Even though he already suspected it, hearing it confirmed felt different. Worse. Much worse. "You all agreed to that?" RM didn't respond. He didn't need to. The silence itself was the answer. "Why?" Jimin asked quietly. RM looked directly into his eyes. "Because every possible outcome ended with you getting hurt." Jimin laughed bitterly. "Congratulations. That plan failed." RM didn't argue. "I know." Another silence followed. Then Jimin asked the question that had been haunting him all night. "What did TAEHYUNG find?" RM looked toward the floor. For a moment, Jimin thought he wouldn't answer. Then RM spoke. "Evidence." The word instantly changed everything. Evidence. Not rumors, not suspicions. Evidence. Evidence of what? Jimin asked. RM hesitated. Something that happened 6 months ago. Jimin felt a chill run through his body. Once again, everything connected back to that same period. The worst period. The period nobody wanted to discuss. What happened 6 months ago? RM remained silent. Suga suddenly interrupted. Stop. Everyone looked toward him. Suga's expression had become serious. If we're going to tell him, we tell him everything. RM frowned. Now? Especially now. Suga folded his arms. The rules don't matter anymore. Nobody disagreed. Because deep down, they all knew he was right. The secret they had protected for months was already collapsing. There was no putting it back together. Jimin sat down slowly. His heart was pounding. Whatever came next would finally reveal why his entire world had turned upside down overnight. RM pulled out a chair and sat across from him. For several seconds, he simply stared at the table. Then he finally spoke. 6 months ago, during one of the hardest periods of your life, someone outside the group approached you. Jimin frowned. Lots of people approached me. RM nodded. This person was different. Jimin searched his memory. Endless faces flashed through his mind. Staff members, executives, industry figures, managers, fans, reporters. I don't understand. RM's expression darkened. Because we never told you what happened after that meeting. The room became silent again. Jimin slowly looked around. Every member appeared uncomfortable. Every member except him already knew where this story was going. What meeting? Jimin asked. RM leaned forward. The private one. Jimin's eyes narrowed. Then, suddenly, a memory resurfaced. A private conversation after a schedule. A closed office. An uncomfortable discussion. Something he had forgotten because it seemed unimportant at the time. Wait. His voice became quieter. That meeting? RM nodded. Yes. Jimin felt his heartbeat accelerate. What about it? RM opened his mouth, then stopped. Before he could continue, Suga's phone suddenly rang. Everyone turned. Suga looked at the screen. His expression changed immediately. It's JUNGKOOK. The room exploded into motion. Suga answered instantly and placed the call on speaker. Where are you? Static filled the room. Heavy breathing followed. Then JUNGKOOK's voice appeared. I found him. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared interrupt. Where? RM asked. Another pause. Then JUNGKOOK answered. The old practice building. Every person in the room froze. The old practice building. A place filled with memories, victories, failures, dreams. The place where everything had started years ago. The place none of them visited anymore. Is Taehyung okay? Jin asked. Silence. Then JUNGKOOK spoke again. His voice sounded strained. No. The answer hit everyone hard. Jimin felt his chest tighten. What happened? Another long pause followed. The kind of pause that only comes before terrible news. Finally, JUNGKOOK answered. He told me he's done running. Nobody moved. RM slowly stood up. What does that mean? JUNGKOOK's next sentence changed everything. It means he's going to tell Jimin the truth himself. The room fell silent. Completely silent. Because every person there understood exactly what that meant. Months of lies. Months of secrets. Months of protection. All of it was about to end. One way or another. And judging by the fear in JUNGKOOK's voice, the truth waiting at that old practice building was powerful enough to destroy far more than friendships. It might destroy the group itself.
The silence inside the practice room became unbearable. Nobody moved. Nobody looked comfortable. Jimin slowly turned his head from one member to another. RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, JUNGKOOK, TAEHYUNG. For the first time in years, he found himself questioning every face in front of him, every friendship, every memory, every promise. Who was it? Jimin asked. His voice was calm now, too calm, the kind of calm that appears right before something breaks. Taehyung looked away. JUNGKOOK clenched his fists. RM closed his eyes. The reaction alone made Jimin's heart sink even further. Tell me. Nobody answered. Tell me. His voice became sharper. Finally, Taehyung spoke. I couldn't prove it. Jimin frowned. What? That's why everything became a mess. Taehyung rubbed his face. The file had a name attached to it, but there wasn't enough evidence. Jimin felt frustration building again. Then why did everyone panic? Suga answered this time. Because the name should have been impossible. The room fell silent. Jimin looked toward him. Impossible how? Suga exhaled heavily. Because if the file was real, then someone close to us had been hiding things for years. Jimin's stomach tightened. Years, not months. Years. Suddenly the scope of the secret felt much larger than he imagined. What kind of things? Jimin asked quietly. Nobody answered immediately. Then J-Hope finally spoke. Information. About me? Jimin asked. J-Hope nodded. About everyone. A chill ran through the room. TAEHYUNG looked miserable. At first I thought it was fake. His voice sounded distant, like he was reliving the memory. I wanted it to be fake. He swallowed hard. But then I started checking. Jimin listened carefully. Every member did, even though they already knew the story. And TAEHYUNG looked down. Some of it was real. Nobody spoke. Jimin's pulse accelerated. Real, the word echoed inside his head. How real? TAEHYUNG laughed bitterly. Real enough to scare me. The room remained silent. Then TAEHYUNG continued. I should have told RM immediately. RM nodded once. But you didn't. TAEHYUNG shook his head. No, why? Jimin asked. TAEHYUNG's answer came instantly. Because I saw JUNGKOOK's name. Everyone froze. Jimin immediately turned toward JUNGKOOK. The younger member didn't react, didn't deny it, didn't defend himself. He simply stood there staring at the floor. What? Jimin whispered. TAEHYUNG closed his eyes. Not as the person responsible. His voice came quickly. As someone investigating it. Jimin felt his heart pounding harder. Investigating? JUNGKOOK finally spoke. I found it before TAEHYUNG did. Every eye turned toward him. The confession instantly changed the atmosphere. JUNGKOOK took a deep breath. 3 weeks before. Nobody interrupted. I thought I could handle it myself. His voice sounded tired, defeated. I thought if I found out who was responsible, I could stop everything before anyone got hurt. Jimin stared at him. You never told me. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. Because the more I investigated, the worse it got. Another silence followed. Then Jin quietly added, that's when the argument started. Jimin looked toward him. Jin nodded. Nobody agreed on what to do. RM folded his arms. Some wanted to expose everything immediately. Suga continued. Others wanted more proof. J-Hope added, and some wanted to bury it completely. Jimin's eyes widened. Bury it? Nobody answered, because somebody in that room had supported exactly that idea. The realization made the atmosphere even heavier. Who wanted that? Jimin asked. No response, not a single response. The silence itself felt suspicious. Then suddenly TAEHYUNG spoke again. The worst part wasn't the file. Jimin looked at him. Then what was? TAEHYUNG hesitated. For the first time all night, genuine fear appeared in his eyes. The person behind it knew we were investigating. The room froze. Jimin felt a cold sensation spread through his chest. How? TAEHYUNG shook his head. We never figured that out. JUNGKOOK immediately disagreed. I did. Everyone looked at him. JUNGKOOK's expression had become serious, very serious. Someone was listening. Nobody spoke. RM frowned. JUNGKOOK. It's true. JUNGKOOK looked directly at him. Every time we got close, information disappeared. Suga's face darkened. J-Hope stopped packing. Jin looked uncomfortable. Suddenly old memories began connecting together. Strange schedule changes, missing documents, conversations interrupted unexpectedly. Things that felt insignificant at the time, not anymore. Are you saying someone inside the group was helping them? Jimin asked. JUNGKOOK didn't answer immediately. Then he slowly nodded. The room instantly erupted. That's impossible, Jin said. Is it? JUNGKOOK shot back. Look at what happened. Nobody responded because nobody could completely dismiss the possibility. Months of secrets, months of failed investigations, months of missing information. Somebody had always seemed one step ahead. No, RM said firmly. I refuse to believe that. JUNGKOOK looked exhausted. I didn't want to believe it either. Jimin felt his heart racing. Every answer was creating something worse, something darker. A threat that seemed to exist inside their own circle. Then suddenly a sound echoed from outside the practice room. Everyone went silent. Footsteps, slow footsteps moving through the hallway. Every member immediately turned toward the door. Nobody had expected anyone else. Nobody even knew they were here. The footsteps stopped directly outside. The room fell completely silent. Then came a single knock. One knock, not three, just one. A deliberate knock, confident, almost mocking. Every member looked at one another. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then a voice came from the other side of the door. a voice none of them expected to hear. You finally told him, didn't you? The blood drained from Taehyung's face. JUNGKOOK immediately stepped in front of JIMIN. RM froze. Suga's eyes widened. And in that terrifying moment, JIMIN realized something that made his entire body go cold. Whoever was standing outside that door already knew exactly what they had been talking about inside the room, which meant the person they had spent months searching for wasn't coming. They had already arrived. Nobody moved. The voice outside the practice room was calm, too calm, as if the person speaking wasn't afraid of being discovered, as if they had expected this moment for a long time. JUNGKOOK instinctively stepped closer to JIMIN. Taehyung looked completely frozen. RM slowly stood up. Every member stared at the door. Then the voice spoke again. Open it. Silence. Or should I come in myself? JIMIN could hear his own heartbeat. Something about the voice felt familiar. Not because he recognized it, because it sounded comfortable, confident, like someone who belonged here. Suga slowly approached the door. Wait, JUNGKOOK warned. Suga stopped. The atmosphere inside the room became suffocating. Then, without warning, the handle started turning. Every member reacted immediately. The door slowly opened. A figure stepped inside. The room froze. JIMIN stared. RM stared. Jin stared. Nobody could believe what they were seeing, because standing in the doorway was not a stranger. Not an enemy, not an outsider. It was their longtime manager, the same manager who had worked beside them for years, the same person who had celebrated victories with them, the same person they trusted. Nobody spoke. The manager calmly closed the door behind him. His expression remained unreadable. I was wondering how long it would take. Taehyung looked like he might collapse. JUNGKOOK's fists tightened immediately. RM stepped forward. How did you find us? The manager smiled slightly. You already know the answer. The room went silent. Every terrible possibility suddenly became real. JIMIN stared at the man. His mind struggled to process it. What is this? He asked quietly. The manager looked directly at him. The truth. JUNGKOOK immediately interrupted. Don't. The manager glanced toward him. You still think you can protect him? The question landed hard. JUNGKOOK's expression darkened. Stay away from him. The manager laughed softly. There it is. He looked toward the others. The same thing that caused all of this. JIMIN frowned. What caused all of this? Nobody answered immediately. Then the manager spoke. JUNGKOOK. Every eye turned toward JUNGKOOK. The younger member remained completely still. What are you talking about? JIMIN asked. The manager folded his arms. The investigation, the files, the secrets, everything started because JUNGKOOK couldn't leave things alone. JUNGKOOK took a step forward. You're lying. Am I? The manager reached into his jacket pocket. Immediately, everyone tensed. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small flash drive. The object instantly caught everyone's attention. Taehyung's face lost all color. No, the manager held it up. Recognize this? Nobody answered. You should. His eyes landed on Taehyung. You stole it from my office. The room exploded into silence. JIMIN looked toward Taehyung. Taehyung couldn't even speak. The manager smiled again. That's right. He turned toward JIMIN. This is where your problems began. JIMIN's stomach tightened. What's on it? The manager looked at him carefully. Then he answered. Everything. The room immediately became colder. RM stepped forward. Enough games. The manager's smile vanished. Games, his voice became sharper. I've spent months cleaning up your mistakes. Nobody interrupted. Months watching all of you tear each other apart. He looked directly at JUNGKOOK. Months watching him become obsessed. JUNGKOOK looked furious now. Stop talking. Why? The manager asked. Because he might finally learn the truth. JIMIN turned toward JUNGKOOK. The younger member immediately looked away. That reaction terrified him more than anything. JUNGKOOK. His voice sounded quieter now. What truth? JUNGKOOK remained silent. The manager laughed softly. See, he pointed directly at JUNGKOOK. Even now he won't tell you. Every member stood frozen. Then the manager inserted the flash drive into a laptop sitting near the practice room wall. Nobody stopped him. Nobody knew how. Within seconds, a screen illuminated the room. File after file appeared. Dates, reports, notes, private records. The amount of information was overwhelming. JIMIN felt his chest tighten. Some of the files contained his name. Others contained names of different members. The manager looked toward the screen. You wanted answers. He turned back toward JIMIN. Now you'll get them. The room fell silent again. Then he clicked one folder. A video file appeared. JUNGKOOK immediately stepped forward. Don't. For the first time all night, genuine panic appeared in his voice. The manager ignored him. The cursor moved toward the video. Taehyung looked horrified. RM looked alarmed. Suga cursed under his breath. Jin closed his eyes. J-Hope stood frozen. And Jimin suddenly realized something terrifying. Every person in this room had seen whatever was inside that video. Every person except him. The manager clicked play. The screen flickered. The footage began. And the very first image that appeared made Jimin's blood run cold, because staring back at him from the screen was himself. 6 months ago, on the worst night of his life, completely unaware that someone had been watching him the entire time. The room became completely silent as the video continued playing. Nobody looked away. Nobody dared speak. Jimin stared at the screen, watching a version of himself from 6 months earlier walk alone through a dark hallway after the private meeting RM had mentioned. He remembered that night. He remembered feeling exhausted, frustrated, lost. What he didn't remember was being recorded. The footage followed him from a distance. Hidden, secretive, unnatural. "What is this?" Jimin asked quietly. The manager didn't answer. The video continued. Jimin watched himself leave the building and step outside into the cold night air. Then something happened, something he had never noticed before. Another figure appeared on screen, following him, not close enough to be seen easily, not far enough to be accidental, following, watching, waiting. The entire room froze. Jimin felt his stomach tight. "Who is that?" Nobody answered immediately. The manager folded his arms. "That's the question that started everything." Taehyung lowered his head. JUNGKOOK looked ready to destroy the laptop. RM looked sick. Suga stared at the floor. J-Hope remained completely motionless. The video continued for another minute. The figure never approached Jimin, never spoke, never revealed their face. They simply followed him through the darkness before disappearing from view. Then the footage ended. Silence, complete silence. Jimin couldn't stop staring at the frozen screen. "Who recorded this?" The manager answered immediately. "I did." The confession hit the room like an explosion. RM stepped forward. "Why?" The manager looked annoyed. "Because it was my job to know what was happening around the group." "That's not your job," JUNGKOOK snapped. "Not like this." The manager ignored him. "The problem isn't the recording." His eyes landed on Jimin. "The problem is what happened after." Jimin slowly looked back toward the screen. "What happened after?" The manager clicked another file. More footage appeared, different dates, different locations, different recordings, every single one connected to the same period, every single one connected to Jimin. The room felt colder with every passing second. "You were being watched," the manager said. Nobody spoke. Jimin felt his chest tighten. "By who?" The manager smiled slightly. "That's where things became complicated." Taehyung suddenly stood up. "Stop!" His voice cracked. "Please stop." Everyone turned toward him. The guilt in his face was impossible to hide. The manager laughed softly. "Still protecting him." Taehyung looked devastated. "You don't understand." "Then explain it," the manager replied. "Because none of you ever did." The atmosphere instantly changed. Something deeper existed beneath the investigation, something more personal, more painful. Jimin noticed JUNGKOOK staring directly at the manager now, not with fear, with anger, real anger. "You manipulated everything," JUNGKOOK said. The manager's expression darkened. "I managed a crisis." "You created one." Silence followed. Then for the first time the manager looked genuinely irritated. "You have no idea what I prevented." JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. "I know exactly what you prevented." Nobody interrupted. The tension between the two men felt years old, much older than the investigation itself. Jimin looked between them. "Somebody tell me what's going on." The manager pointed toward JUNGKOOK. "Ask him." JUNGKOOK didn't move. "Ask him why he spent months breaking into private records." Jimin froze. "What?" RM closed his eyes immediately. Suga cursed under his breath. Taehyung looked away. Every reaction confirmed the statement. "Breaking into records," Jimin repeated. JUNGKOOK finally spoke. "I was trying to find answers." "By doing what?" Jimin asked. JUNGKOOK hesitated, then he answered. "Whatever it took." The room fell silent again. Jimin stared at him. Calm JUNGKOOK he knew suddenly seemed very far away. This version looked exhausted, driven, almost desperate. "Why?" Jimin asked. JUNGKOOK didn't answer immediately, then he finally looked directly at him. "Because nobody else was protecting you." The words hit harder than expected. Nobody spoke. JUNGKOOK continued. "I thought if I found the truth first, I could stop it." His voice sounded raw now, honest, painfully honest. But every answer led to another lie. Taehyung slowly sat back down. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. The manager shook his head. "That's the excuse you've repeated for months." Jungkook's jaw tightened. It's not an excuse. Then what is it? Jungkook looked directly at him. The truth. Another silence followed. Then the manager suddenly clicked another file. This time it wasn't a video, it was a photograph. The image filled the screen. Every member froze. JIMIN felt his heart stop, because the photograph showed the person who had been following him 6 months ago. Their face visible at last, clear, undeniable. JIMIN stared at the image. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Then his eyes widened. The room immediately noticed. "JIMIN?" RM asked quietly. But JIMIN couldn't answer, because he recognized the face. Not from the company, not from the industry, not from the media. He recognized it from somewhere much closer, somewhere much more personal. And in that horrifying moment, JIMIN realized the person who had been secretly watching him 6 months ago wasn't a stranger at all. It was someone connected directly to his past. Someone he thought had disappeared from his life forever. Someone who should never have been anywhere near him again. And judging by the fear spreading across the room, everyone else had known that long before he did. JIMIN couldn't breathe. His eyes remained locked on the photograph. The face on the screen felt impossible, wrong, like a memory that should have stayed buried. The room around him disappeared. The voices disappeared. Everything disappeared except the image staring back at him. "No!" The word escaped his lips before he even realized it. Nobody spoke. Nobody interrupted, because every member already knew exactly what he was looking at. Jungkook lowered his head. TAEHYUNG closed his eyes. RM looked away. Suga folded his arms tightly. J-Hope stood motionless. Even the manager remained silent. JIMIN slowly stepped closer to the screen. His heartbeat thundered inside his ears. "That's impossible." The photograph didn't change. The face remained there, real, undeniable. "JIMIN," RM started. "No." JIMIN shook his head immediately. "No." His voice became louder. "That's impossible." Months of confusion suddenly transformed into something else. Fear, genuine fear, because the person in the photograph wasn't supposed to know where he was, wasn't supposed to know anything about his life anymore, wasn't supposed to be connected to any part of his present, yet somehow they were. "When did you find this?" JIMIN asked quietly. Nobody answered immediately. Then TAEHYUNG spoke. 4 months ago." JIMIN slowly turned toward him. 4 months, TAEHYUNG nodded. His expression looked miserable. "That's when I realized the situation was bigger than we thought." Bigger than they thought. JIMIN laughed bitterly. "You think?" Nobody responded, because there was nothing to say. The photograph alone explained why everyone had panicked, why everyone had hidden things, why everyone had argued. The problem wasn't just surveillance. The problem was the identity of the person behind it. Jungkook finally stepped forward. The photo wasn't enough. JIMIN looked toward him. Jungkook's face was exhausted. "That's why I kept investigating." The manager immediately laughed. "Investigating?" He shook his head. "You call that investigating?" Jungkook ignored him. His eyes remained fixed on JIMIN. "I needed proof." "Proof of what?" JIMIN asked. Silence. Then Jungkook answered, "That they weren't alone." Room instantly became silent again. JIMIN felt his stomach tighten. "What does that mean?" Jungkook hesitated. For a moment he seemed unsure whether he should continue. Then he finally spoke. "The person following you wasn't acting alone." Every member froze, even though they already knew. Hearing it aloud still felt dangerous. "There were others," Jungkook continued. "More people." JIMIN stared at him. "How many?" Jungkook shook his head. "We never found out." The answer sent another chill through the room. Because if that was true, then the problem wasn't one person. It was an entire network of unknown people watching from the shadows. The manager suddenly interrupted. And that's when he crossed the line. Jungkook looked toward him. "You mean when I got closer than you wanted?" The manager's smile vanished. "I mean when you started risking everyone." The atmosphere immediately shifted. Tension crackled between them. Old tension. Months of unresolved conflict. JIMIN noticed it instantly. "What happened?" He asked. Nobody answered. Then TAEHYUNG quietly spoke. "Jungkook disappeared." JIMIN frowned. "What?" TAEHYUNG looked toward the floor. "For 3 days." The room fell silent. JIMIN turned toward Jungkook. 3 days? Jungkook didn't deny it, didn't explain it. He simply stood there. "Nobody knew where he was," TAEHYUNG continued. "Not RM, not the company, not us." RM nodded once. "It was the worst week of the entire investigation." JIMIN felt another piece of the puzzle fall into place. "What were you doing?" Jungkook hesitated. Then he answered quietly. "Following a lead." The manager laughed again. "A lead that almost got you destroyed." Jungkook's expression hardened. "But it was real." Nobody argued, nobody corrected him, which meant he was telling the truth. JIMIN stared at the younger member. The image forming in his mind felt unfamiliar. This wasn't the JUNGKOOK everyone saw. This was someone who had spent months chasing answers in secret. Someone carrying a burden nobody knew how to stop. Someone willing to risk everything. "What did you find?" JIMIN asked. The room immediately became silent. Every member looked uncomfortable. Every member except the manager. He looked almost amused. "Go ahead," he said. "Tell him." JUNGKOOK's jaw tightened. "Not like this." "Why not?" the manager replied. "Because once he hears it, none of this matters anymore." JIMIN looked between them. "Hear what?" Nobody answered. Then the manager reached toward the laptop again. JUNGKOOK instantly moved. "Don't!" The warning came too late. The manager clicked another file. A document appeared on the screen. Unlike the others, this one wasn't filled with reports or dates. It was a single page. A single page with one name written across the top. JIMIN's eyes immediately moved toward it. Then he froze, completely froze. The room watched his reaction carefully. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved, because they all knew what he was reading. They had read it months ago. JIMIN's hands slowly started shaking. "No!" His voice barely came out. JUNGKOOK immediately stepped forward. "JIMIN!" But JIMIN wasn't listening anymore, because written beneath that name was a sentence that changed everything he believed about the last 6 months. A sentence proving that the person watching him wasn't the real target at all. He was. And from the very beginning, somebody had been using him as bait. The room disappeared around JIMIN. The voices became distant. The walls felt farther away. Everything narrowed down to the document glowing on the laptop screen. One sentence, one terrible sentence, one truth that instantly rearranged every event from the last 6 months. JIMIN was not caught in the middle of someone else's problem. He was the center of it, the target, the reason everything started, the reason everyone lied, the reason everyone fought, the reason JUNGKOOK changed. "No." JIMIN whispered. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. "That's not possible." Nobody answered, because nobody could. The document wasn't a theory, it wasn't a rumor, it wasn't speculation, it was evidence. The exact thing JUNGKOOK had spent months searching for. The exact thing TAEHYUNG had been terrified of revealing. The exact thing RM had hoped would never reach this moment. JIMIN slowly looked up. His eyes moved across the faces around him. Every single person already knew. Every single person had carried this truth while pretending everything was normal. "How long?" he asked quietly. Nobody responded immediately. Then RM answered. 4 months. JIMIN laughed, a hollow laugh, empty. 4 months. His voice cracked slightly. 4 months and nobody told me. RM looked devastated. "We were trying to protect you." JIMIN immediately looked away. He was tired of hearing that phrase, protect you. Every lie had been justified with those words, every secret. Every betrayal, every decision, protect you, yet somehow he felt less protected than ever. JUNGKOOK stepped forward. "JIMIN." JIMIN didn't look at him. "Don't." The younger member froze. The room became silent. Then JIMIN slowly turned toward the manager. "Who wrote this?" The manager remained calm. "That's the wrong question. Answer me." "The real question," the manager continued, "is why it was written." JIMIN felt anger returning. "I asked who wrote it." The manager stared at him for several seconds, then he finally answered. "Someone who knew exactly how to reach you." Nobody moved. The answer only made things worse, more personal, more dangerous. JIMIN looked back at the screen. Every line of the document felt like a threat disguised as information. Every detail proved the same thing. Someone had been studying him, watching him, learning his routines, learning his weaknesses, learning the people closest to him. Then another realization hit him. A realization so disturbing it made his stomach twist. "The members." His voice sounded distant. "They weren't investigating because they were afraid for themselves." Nobody spoke. JIMIN slowly turned toward JUNGKOOK. "They were afraid for me." JUNGKOOK didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence confirmed everything. For months, while JIMIN believed life was continuing normally, 6 other people had been fighting a war he didn't even know existed. A war centered entirely around him. TAEHYUNG lowered his head. "That's why we couldn't tell you." JIMIN looked toward him. TAEHYUNG's eyes were filled with regret. "Every time we discussed it, the same question came up." "What question?" JIMIN asked. TAEHYUNG hesitated, then he answered. "What happens if JIMIN finds out?" The room fell silent. JIMIN felt his chest tighten. RM spoke next. "There was never a good answer." Suga nodded slowly. "Every option was bad." Jin added quietly, "Some of us wanted to tell you immediately." J-Hope looked toward the floor. "Others thought it would make things worse." JIMIN stared at them. For the first time all night, he could see how exhausted everyone looked. Not guilty, exhausted, like people who had spent months carrying something too heavy for them. Then his eyes landed on JUNGKOOK, the one person who looked more exhausted than anyone else. Suddenly the pieces began fitting together. The constant worry, the distance, the arguments, the obsession everyone mentioned. It all connected back to the same source. Fear. JUNGKOOK wasn't chasing answers because he was curious. He wasn't risking everything because he enjoyed danger. He was terrified that something would happen before he uncovered the truth. The realization hit JIMIN harder than expected. Then the manager suddenly laughed. The sound instantly broke the moment. Every member looked toward him. "Touching," he said coldly. "Really touching." His eyes moved across the room. "Too bad none of it changes reality." JUNGKOOK immediately stepped forward. "What reality?" The manager looked directly at him. "The one you're still refusing to admit." The atmosphere changed again. Instantly, dangerous, sharp. JUNGKOOK's expression darkened. "Don't." "Why?" the manager asked. "Because they'll finally understand." Nobody spoke. The manager slowly pointed toward the laptop screen. "That document wasn't the discovery." The room froze. RM frowned. Suga looked confused. Even TAEHYUNG appeared surprised. "What?" RM asked. The manager smiled slightly. "The document only led to the real discovery." Silence. Complete silence. Then the manager clicked another folder. Nobody stopped him. Nobody could. A single video file appeared. Unlike the others, this one had no label, no description, no date, just a blank file name. JUNGKOOK's face instantly lost color. JIMIN noticed immediately, so did everyone else. "No," JUNGKOOK said quietly. The manager looked at him. "Now you're scared." JUNGKOOK took a step forward. "Don't play it." The manager's smile widened slightly. "You already know what's inside." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The cursor hovered over the file. JUNGKOOK looked genuinely panicked for the first time all night. Not worried, not angry, panicked. JIMIN felt a chill spread through his entire body. Because if this was the thing that frightened JUNGKOOK after everything they had already uncovered, then whatever existed inside that file was worse than all the secrets before it combined. The manager clicked play. The screen flickered. The video loaded. A dark image slowly appeared. Then a familiar room came into focus. A room that made every member freeze instantly. Because it wasn't a random location. It wasn't an office. It wasn't a hallway. It wasn't somewhere connected to the investigation. It was one of their own private dorm rooms. And as the footage continued playing, JIMIN realized with horror that the camera had been hidden there the entire time. Meaning someone hadn't just been watching him from a distance. Someone had been inside their lives all along. And the first person who appeared in that secret recording was not JIMIN. It was JUNGKOOK. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The hidden recording continued playing across the screen while every member stood frozen in disbelief. Even those who had spent months investigating seemed shocked by what they were seeing. JUNGKOOK appeared on the footage alone inside the dorm. The timestamp showed a date from almost 5 months earlier, long before tonight, long before the arguments became impossible to hide, long before the group started breaking apart behind closed doors. JIMIN stared at the screen. JUNGKOOK looked exhausted even then. He sat on the edge of his bed with papers spread across the floor. Documents, notes, printed photographs, the same investigation, the same obsession everyone kept mentioning. "What is this?" RM asked quietly. For the first time all night, even he sounded lost. The manager didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the video. JUNGKOOK's face had become completely pale. "Turn it off." The manager ignored him. The footage continued. JUNGKOOK picked up one of the documents and stared at it for nearly a minute. Then he said something, a single sentence. The audio was weak but clear enough for everyone to hear. "If I'm right, they're already close." Silence filled the room. JIMIN felt his chest tighten. The JUNGKOOK on screen sounded afraid, not curious, not determined, afraid. The video jumped forward. Another timestamp, another night. JUNGKOOK was still there, still investigating, still alone, more documents, more photographs. More sleepless nights. Then another voice suddenly appeared in the recording. The room immediately froze because the voice wasn't coming from inside the dorm. It was coming from somewhere near the hidden camera itself. Someone unseen, someone watching. "He's getting closer." Every member reacted instantly. Suga stepped forward. Jin looked horrified. Taehyung's eyes widened. RM's face darkened. JIMIN felt ice spread through his veins. There had been someone else there, listening, watching, recording everything. The hidden voice continued. "We need to move faster." The footage ended abruptly. The screen went black, nobody breathed, nobody spoke. Then Jimin slowly turned toward the manager. "You knew." The manager didn't deny it. "Of course I knew." The answer exploded through the room. JUNGKOOK immediately moved forward. "You knew there was a camera." The manager laughed softly. "There were several." Complete silence followed. Every member looked stunned. Even RM appeared unable to process the confession. "Several." J-Hope repeated. The manager nodded. "You really thought that was the only one?" Jimin felt sick. The dorms, the practice rooms, their private spaces, the places they considered safe, the places they considered home. Suddenly none of them felt safe anymore. "Who planted them?" Jin asked. The manager looked toward the laptop. "That's the question you've all been asking for months." Nobody interrupted. Then he added, "And the answer is why everything fell apart." JUNGKOOK clenched his fists. "Stop talking in riddles." The manager looked directly at him. "You already know." The room instantly became silent. Jimin turned toward JUNGKOOK, slowly, carefully, because something about the manager's tone felt different, dangerous. JUNGKOOK didn't look angry anymore, he looked trapped. "JUNGKOOK," Jimin asked quietly. The younger member remained silent. The manager smiled slightly. "There it is." Nobody moved. Then the manager stepped closer to the screen and opened another folder. Hundreds of files appeared, audio recordings, photographs, reports. The sheer amount of material was overwhelming. Years of information, years, not months, years. The room went completely silent. "Impossible," RM whispered. The manager shook his head. "Unfortunately not." Jimin stared at the files. His heartbeat became louder with every second. Someone had spent years collecting information about them, watching them, following them, learning everything. And somehow nobody noticed until recently. "Why us?" Jimin asked. The manager's expression became unreadable. "Because somebody believed one of you belonged to them." The sentence landed like a bomb. Nobody spoke. Nobody even blinked. Belonged, not targeted, not monitored. Belonged, a disturbing word, a disturbing idea. Jimin felt a chill run through his body. Then the manager slowly looked toward him. "Specifically you." The room froze. Every member turned toward Jimin. The air suddenly felt impossible to breathe. "What?" Jimin whispered. The manager folded his arms. "That's what JUNGKOOK discovered." Nobody moved. The investigation wasn't random. His eyes remained fixed on Jimin. "You weren't being watched for information." Silence. "You were being watched because someone became obsessed." The room immediately exploded into tension. TAEHYUNG looked sick. Suga cursed under his breath. RM closed his eyes. Jin sat down heavily. J-Hope looked toward the floor. They all knew this part, every single one of them. Jimin slowly backed away from the screen. The revelation felt worse than anything before it, worse than the surveillance, worse than the lies, worse than the hidden files, because obsession meant unpredictability. Obsession meant danger. Obsession meant someone who wouldn't stop. Then the manager spoke the sentence that changed everything once again. "The problem is..." He paused deliberately. Every eye locked onto him. The person who became obsessed wasn't the one running the operation. Complete silence. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Jimin felt his heart stop, because that meant there were two people, the watcher, and the one controlling the watcher. Two separate threats, two separate secrets, two separate nightmares. And judging by the expressions around him, the second person was far more terrifying than the first. The manager slowly reached toward the laptop again. Another file appeared. Another name. Another piece of the truth. Then he looked directly at Jimin and said, "The person behind everything isn't someone from your past. It's someone who's been standing much closer than that." And at that exact moment, every member in the room realized the worst part of the story hadn't even begun yet. The room fell into complete silence. Nobody moved after hearing the manager's words. The person behind everything wasn't someone from Jimin's past. It was someone closer, much closer. Jimin slowly looked around the practice room. His eyes moved across every face. RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, TAEHYUNG, JUNGKOOK. For the first time all night, a horrifying possibility entered his mind. If the mastermind was closer than anyone imagined, then the danger had been standing beside them for months, maybe years. The thought alone made his stomach twist. "Who?" Jimin asked. His voice sounded distant. The manager didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched the members carefully, almost like he was studying their reactions. "You already know the answer," he finally said. JUNGKOOK immediately stepped forward. "Stop!" The warning came instantly, sharp, desperate. The manager looked amused. "Still trying to save everyone?" JUNGKOOK's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to stop you." "No," the manager shook his head. "You're trying to stop the truth." The atmosphere became dangerous again. Every second felt heavier than the last. JIMIN looked directly at JUNGKOok. What truth? JUNGKOok remained silent. The silence itself became an answer. TAEHYUNG suddenly stood up. He's right. Every head turned toward him. TAEHYUNG looked exhausted, like a person carrying too much guilt for too long. The truth won't fix anything. JIMIN frowned. What does that mean? TAEHYUNG laughed bitterly. It means we were too late. Nobody spoke. RM slowly looked toward him. TAEHYUNG. But TAEHYUNG continued. That's the part nobody wants to admit. His voice trembled slightly. The investigation didn't fail because we lacked evidence. Silence. It failed because whoever was behind this was always ahead of us. The room became still. JIMIN remembered something JUNGKOok said earlier. Every time they got close, information disappeared. Every time they found a lead, somebody already knew. Every step forward somehow turned into 2 steps back, which meant there had always been a leak. Someone feeding information to the enemy. Someone watching the investigators themselves. Realization sent a chill through the room. Then Suga quietly asked the question nobody wanted to ask. Who was helping them? The manager smiled slightly. Nobody liked that smile. Now we're getting somewhere. JUNGKOok immediately shook his head. Don't. The manager ignored him. You spent months looking outside. His eyes swept across the room, when the answer was always here. JIMIN felt his pulse spike. Every member looked uneasy. Even RM appeared shaken. Then the manager opened another file. A photograph appeared on the screen. This time nobody reacted immediately, because nobody recognized the image at first. It showed a parking garage, dark, empty, unremarkable. Then the manager zoomed in. The room froze. A familiar figure appeared in the corner of the photograph, standing beside a black vehicle, talking to someone. JIMIN narrowed his eyes. The image sharpened. Suddenly recognition hit. No way! The words escaped before he could stop them. The figure wasn't a stranger. It wasn't an outsider. It was one of the people inside the room. Every member immediately looked at the screen. Then their expressions changed. Shock, confusion, disbelief. The photograph showed TAEHYUNG standing beside an unknown person late at night. TAEHYUNG's face immediately lost color. What? RM whispered. TAEHYUNG stared at the image, completely stunned. I've never seen that. The manager laughed softly. Of course you haven't. JUNGKOok's expression darkened. That's not evidence. The manager looked toward him. No. Another image appeared, then another, multiple photographs, different nights, different locations. The same pattern every time, TAEHYUNG. The same unknown individual, secret meetings, secret conversations, secret contact. The room erupted into confusion. That's impossible, Jin said. TAEHYUNG looked horrified. I swear I've never met that person. J-Hope frowned. Then why are you in the pictures? Nobody had an answer, not even TAEHYUNG. The situation instantly became chaotic. Doubt spread through the room like poison. Exactly the kind of doubt that destroys trust. Exactly the kind of doubt that had been destroying them for months. Then JUNGKOok suddenly stepped in front of the screen. It's fake. The room went silent. The manager laughed. You sound very sure. Because I've seen these before. Every member froze. JIMIN stared at him. What? JUNGKOok looked toward the photograph. These images are the reason everything fell apart. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The manager's smile slowly disappeared. JUNGKOok continued. 3 months ago, somebody sent these pictures anonymously. RM's eyes widened. Suga looked shocked. Jin sat forward. J-Hope stopped moving completely. TAEHYUNG looked confused. What are you talking about? JUNGKOok ignored him. His eyes remained fixed on the manager. The photos were manipulated. Silence. Complete silence. Then JUNGKOok pointed directly at the screen. That person beside TAEHYUNG doesn't exist. The room exploded into disbelief. JIMIN looked back at the image, the unknown figure, the strange angles, the shadows. Suddenly things that seemed normal seconds ago looked different, wrong, artificial. No, RM whispered. The manager's expression hardened. For the first time all night he looked uncomfortable. JUNGKOok noticed immediately. There it is. His voice became colder. The look you've been hiding for months. Nobody spoke. The manager slowly folded his arms. Careful. JUNGKOok stepped forward. Why? Because you're about to accuse the wrong person. JUNGKOok laughed bitterly. No, he pointed directly at him. For the first time, I'm accusing the right one. The room instantly froze. Every member turned toward the manager. The accusation hung in the air, heavy, dangerous, impossible, yet somehow believable, because suddenly months of missing evidence, disappearing information, and endless dead ends all pointed toward one person. The one individual who had access to everything, every schedule, every location, every conversation, every private detail. The manager. And as the realization spread across the room, JIMIN noticed something terrifying. The manager wasn't denying it. He wasn't defending himself. He wasn't shocked. He was smiling, as if this was the exact moment he had been waiting for all along. The smile on the manager's face changed everything. Not because it proved JUNGKOOK was right, because it proved he wasn't afraid. A man wrongly accused would defend himself. A man cornered would panic. A man exposed would try to escape. But the manager simply stood there smiling. Calm, patient, almost relieved. The room fell into complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody knew what to say next. JUNGKOOK stared directly at him. The manager stared back. The tension between them felt years old. Like two people who had been moving toward this exact confrontation for a very long time. Say something, RM finally demanded. The manager slowly looked toward him. About what? RM's expression hardened. The accusation. The manager laughed softly. Which one? Nobody liked that answer, not even a little. Suga stepped forward. Stop playing games. The manager's eyes shifted toward him. Games, he shook his head. You still think this is a game? JIMIN felt his pulse accelerating. The atmosphere inside the practice room was becoming unbearable. Every answer created new questions. Every revelation seemed larger than the last, yet one thing was becoming clear. JUNGKOOK had reached this point months ago. Somehow he had already connected the pieces everyone else was only beginning to see. Tell them, JUNGKOOK said quietly. The manager raised an eyebrow. Tell them what? JUNGKOOK didn't hesitate. About the meetings. The room instantly froze. TAEHYUNG looked confused. Jin frowned. Rem narrowed his eyes. J-Hope stopped packing. JIMIN looked directly at JUNGKOOK. What meetings? Nobody answered immediately. Then the manager sighed dramatically. Still obsessed with that? JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. You mean the thing that destroyed the entire investigation? The room went silent. The manager's smile faded slightly. That tiny reaction was enough. JUNGKOOK noticed it. So did RM, so did Suga. There it is, JUNGKOOK whispered. The manager folded his arms. You're making assumptions. No. JUNGKOOK shook his head. I'm making connections. JIMIN stared at him. What meetings? This time his voice came out louder, sharper. He was tired of being ignored, tired of watching everyone dance around the truth. JUNGKOOK finally looked toward him. The exhaustion in his eyes was impossible to miss. 3 months ago, he said quietly, I found records showing someone from inside the company was meeting privately with the people watching you. The room exploded into silence. JIMIN felt his stomach drop. RM froze. Jin looked shocked. J-Hope looked confused. Suga immediately turned toward the manager. Nobody spoke, because nobody needed to. The implication was obvious. And, JIMIN asked. JUNGKOOK swallowed hard. Every trail led to him. His eyes moved toward the manager. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then the manager suddenly laughed, loudly this time, openly. The sound echoed across the practice room. That's your evidence, he asked. JUNGKOOK didn't react. Meeting people. The manager shook his head. You really are unbelievable. RM stepped forward. Answer the question. The manager looked toward him. Fine, he shrugged casually. Yes. The room froze, complete silence. Nobody expected him to admit it so easily. Even JUNGKOOK looked surprised. Yes, RM repeated. The manager nodded. I met them. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The confession hung in the air like a bomb. Then Jin finally whispered, Why? The manager looked around the room. His expression had become strangely serious. Because somebody had to. Nobody understood. Not yet. The confusion spread instantly. Then the manager continued. The difference between me and all of you, he paused, is that I understood how dangerous the situation really was. Silence followed. Then TAEHYUNG shook his head. That doesn't make any sense. Of course it doesn't, the manager replied, because none of you ever saw the full picture. JUNGKOOK immediately interrupted. Then show it. The manager looked directly at him. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then the manager slowly nodded. Fine. He turned back toward the laptop. Another folder appeared. Unlike the others, this one contained only a single file. One video. The room immediately became tense again. What is that? JIMIN asked. The manager's expression darkened. The reason I got involved. Nobody spoke. Then he added quietly, the reason I broke every rule. The room froze. RM looked uneasy. Suga looked suspicious. TAEHYUNG looked nervous. JUNGKOOK looked terrified, truly terrified. JIMIN noticed immediately. You've seen it. JUNGKOOK didn't answer. The silence confirmed everything. The manager clicked the file. The video loaded. Static filled the screen for several seconds, then an image appeared. At first, nobody understood what they were seeing. A dark room, a desk, a chair, nothing unusual, then a figure entered the frame. The room immediately went silent. Because the figure wasn't a stranger, it wasn't the manager. It wasn't anyone outside the group. It was JUNGKOOK, recorded months ago, sitting alone, looking exhausted. The footage continued. JUNGKOOK placed several photographs onto the desk. The same photographs connected to the investigation. The same evidence, the same obsession. Then the video captured something nobody expected. JUNGKOOK wasn't alone. Another person walked into frame, their face hidden from the camera, their identity impossible to see, but their voice made every member freeze, every single member, because they recognized it instantly. A voice they had trusted for years. A voice that belonged to someone they never suspected. And as the recording continued, the unknown figure quietly said, "If JIMIN learns the truth now, everything we've built will collapse." The room went completely silent, because for the first time all night, the real mastermind wasn't a theory anymore. They weren't a possibility. They weren't a shadow hiding in the background. They were someone the members knew personally. Someone who had been standing beside them the entire time. And judging by the horror spreading across every face in the room, the identity hidden behind that familiar voice was about to destroy what remained of their trust forever. Nobody breathed, nobody moved. The voice from the recording echoed through the practice room long after the sentence ended. Every member stood frozen. Every face carried the same expression. Shock, pure shock. JIMIN looked around the room. RM looked stunned. Jin's eyes were wide. Suga had gone completely silent. J-Hope looked like he couldn't process what he had just heard. TAEHYUNG slowly stepped backward until he hit the wall behind him. Even JUNGKOOK, who had known more than anyone else, looked shaken. The video continued playing. On the screen, JUNGKOOK sat across from the unknown figure. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then JUNGKOOK finally said something. "He deserves the truth." The hidden figure immediately replied. "No." The answer came fast, firm, certain. "He deserves safety." The room became silent again. JIMIN felt his chest tighten. That phrase, safety, protection, the same words everyone had been using all night, the same justification behind every lie, every secret. Every betrayal. The video continued. JUNGKOOK leaned forward. "You can't decide that for him." The hidden figure responded instantly. "Someone has to." The footage froze for a moment. Static flashed across the screen. Then the recording jumped ahead several minutes. The conversation had clearly continued. Tension filled the room. Then another sentence came through the speakers. A sentence that changed everything. "If he finds out who's really behind this, he'll never forgive us." Silence. Complete silence. Every member stared at the screen. JUNGKOOK slowly lowered his head inside the recording. The hidden figure continued speaking. "And if he doesn't forgive us..." A pause followed. "There won't be a group left to save." The video stopped. The screen went black. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room felt frozen in time. JIMIN's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it. The hidden figure clearly knew everything. They knew about the investigation. They knew about the surveillance. They knew about the danger. Most importantly, they knew exactly how everyone would react, which meant they had been involved from the beginning. "Who is it?" JIMIN asked quietly. No one answered. Then slowly, almost unwillingly, every member looked toward the same person. The exact same person, at the exact same time. JIMIN followed their gaze. His stomach immediately dropped. The manager noticed too. His smile slowly returned. A dangerous smile. A smile that said the truth had finally arrived. The room remained completely silent. Then the manager spoke. "Go ahead." Nobody moved. "Say it." RM looked pale. Suga looked conflicted. Jin looked devastated. J-Hope couldn't even meet anyone's eyes. TAEHYUNG looked like he wanted to disappear. JIMIN stared at them all. "Who?" he demanded. Then JUNGKOOK finally stepped forward. The exhaustion in his face had completely disappeared. In its place was something else. Resolve. The same resolve that had driven him through months of investigation. The same resolve that had made him risk everything. He looked directly at JIMIN. "The voice belongs to someone who thought they were helping." Silence. "Someone who believed every lie was necessary." More silence. "Someone who thought protecting you mattered more than telling you the truth." The room felt smaller with every word. Then JUNGKOOK slowly turned toward the final person standing near the back wall. The person nobody had suspected at the beginning. The person who had been there through every conversation. Every argument, every secret. JUNGKOOK pointed directly at them. The room froze. JIMIN's eyes widened. His breath caught in his throat. because the person JUNGKOOK had just accused was not the manager, not an outsider, not a hidden enemy. It was one of the members themselves. And the second the accusation left JUNGKOOK's mouth, that member looked up and quietly said, "You're still missing the most important part." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The accused member slowly stepped forward into the center of the room. Their expression wasn't guilty. It wasn't angry. It wasn't afraid. It was sad, deeply sad. Then they looked directly at JIMIN and spoke the one sentence nobody expected to hear. "I wasn't protecting you from them." The room went completely silent. "I was protecting them from you." And in that moment, every person inside the practice room realized the truth they had been chasing for months was far more dangerous than any of them imagined, because the real secret wasn't who had been watching JIMIN. It was what they had discovered about him. The words hit the room like an explosion. Nobody reacted immediately because nobody could. JIMIN stood completely still, staring at the member who had just spoken, "Protecting them from you." The sentence sounded impossible, absurd, yet the expression on everyone's face made it clear that nobody considered it a joke. RM looked away first. Jin lowered his head. Suga folded his arms tighter. J-Hope closed his eyes. Taehyung looked devastated. JUNGKOOK remained motionless. JIMIN felt his pulse pounding in his ears. "What does that mean?" he asked quietly. The accused member took another step forward. "It means this story was never as simple as everyone wanted it to be." Nobody interrupted. "It means every person in this room only knows part of what happened." Jimin's stomach tightened. "Then tell me the whole thing." The room fell silent again. For several seconds, the members seemed unsure whether to continue. Then they finally nodded. "6 months ago, after that meeting, you weren't just being watched." Jimin frowned. "You already told me that." "No," the members shook their head. "We told you someone was following you." Their voice became heavier. "We never told you why." Silence spread across the room. Even the manager stopped smiling. Jimin noticed that immediately. Whatever was coming next seemed important even to him. "Why?" Jimin asked. The member looked directly into his eyes. "Because that night wasn't random." The room instantly became still. "The person following you wasn't gathering information." A pause followed. "They were verifying something." Jimin felt a chill run through his body. "Verifying what?" Nobody spoke. Then the member answered. "Whether the rumors were true." The words echoed through the practice room. "Rumors." Jimin stared at them. "What rumors?" Another terrible silence followed. The member swallowed hard. "Rumors about what happened before you joined us that nobody could explain." Jimin froze, completely froze, his past, the one topic he never expected to become part of this nightmare. RM immediately stepped forward. "Stop." The member looked toward him. "We can't stop anymore." RM's expression hardened. "Not this way. There isn't another way." The atmosphere grew heavier with every second. JUNGKOOK suddenly spoke. "That's why I told everyone to destroy the files." Every member turned toward him. Jimin felt another piece of the puzzle slide into place. "You what?" JUNGKOOK looked exhausted. "The deeper we dug, the worse it became." Nobody argued, nobody corrected him, which meant it was true. "What became worse?" Jimin asked. JUNGKOOK hesitated, then he answered quietly. "The answers." The room went silent again, then Taehyung finally looked up. His eyes were red. "You want to know why I ran tonight?" Jimin turned toward him. Taehyung laughed bitterly. "Because I saw the final report." Nobody moved. "The report none of us were supposed to find." RM immediately looked alarmed. Suga cursed under his breath. Jin looked sick. J-Hope stared at the floor. The manager slowly smiled again. Taehyung continued speaking anyway. "The report connected everything." His voice shook slightly. "The surveillance, the files, the meetings, the lies." Jimin felt his heart racing. "And," Taehyung closed his eyes, "and it revealed what they were actually searching for." The room became completely silent. Nobody breathed, nobody blinked. Then Taehyung opened his eyes and looked directly at Jimin. "They weren't investigating your present." A pause followed. "They were investigating your past." Every person in the room froze, because for the first time all night, the mystery was no longer moving toward the people around Jimin. It was moving directly toward Jimin himself. And as the realization settled over everyone, one terrifying question remained unanswered. What could possibly exist in Jimin's past that was dangerous enough to make an entire operation spend years trying to uncover it? Nobody spoke after Taehyung's words. The practice room felt frozen. Jimin stood motionless, trying to process what he had just heard. His past. Somehow, after months of investigations, lies, surveillance, and betrayal, everything led back to his past. It made no sense. He wasn't hiding anything, at least nothing he knew about. "You're wrong," JIMIN finally said. His voice sounded calm, but everyone could hear the tension underneath. "There's nothing in my past worth this." TAEHYUNG looked away. JUNGKOOK closed his eyes. RM remained silent. The reactions immediately told JIMIN something he didn't want to believe. They weren't sure. "Tell him," the manager suddenly said. Nobody moved. "Tell him what the report actually said." RM immediately stepped forward. "Enough," the manager laughed. "You still think you can stop this?" RM's expression hardened. "I think you've done enough damage." "Damage," the manager shook his head. "I didn't create the truth." The room fell silent again. Then Suga spoke. "What was in the report?" Every eye turned toward him. Nobody expected him to ask the question. Not now, not after everything, yet there it was. The question everyone had been avoiding for months. The manager slowly looked toward Suga, then toward JIMIN. The report contained one conclusion. Nobody interrupted. One possibility. JIMIN felt his heartbeat accelerating. "What possibility?" The manager's expression became unreadable. "That someone spent years searching for you because they believed you had information." Silence, complete silence. JIMIN stared at him. "Information?" The manager nodded. "Something they thought you knew." JIMIN laughed bitterly. "I don't even know what you're talking about." "Exactly." The manager pointed toward him. "That's what made the investigation so confusing." RM looked frustrated. "Stop twisting everything." But the manager continued anyway. Every lead ended the same way. His eyes remained fixed on JIMIN. "Nobody could prove you knew anything." The room remained silent. Then Jin suddenly asked, "Then why continue?" The manager looked toward him. "Because somebody believed he was pretending." The answer landed heavily. JIMIN felt anger building again. Months of secrets, months of lies, all because of something somebody believed. That's insane. "We know," JUNGKOOK said quietly. The room turned toward him. JUNGKOOK looked exhausted. "That's why I spent months trying to prove it was wrong." Nobody spoke. JIMIN stared at him. "You were trying to prove what was wrong." JUNGKOOK hesitated, then he answered. "The theory." Silence followed. "What theory?" JIMIN demanded. JUNGKOOK looked directly into his eyes. For a moment it seemed like he was about to reveal everything. Then he stopped, his expression darkened. "No." The room froze. JIMIN frowned. "What?" JUNGKOOK shook his head. "Not like this." The manager laughed softly. "Still protecting him." JUNGKOOK ignored him completely. His eyes never left JIMIN. "Some truths don't help people." Nobody moved. Then TAEHYUNG suddenly stood. "I disagree." The room immediately turned toward him. TAEHYUNG looked more determined than he had all night. "That's exactly why we're here." RM looked worried. "TAEHYUNG." But TAEHYUNG continued. "We spent months deciding what JIMIN could handle." His voice trembled slightly. "Months deciding what he deserved to know." The guilt on his face was obvious. "And look where it got us." Silence spread through the room. Nobody could argue with that because everything had collapsed anyway. The lies hadn't protected anyone. They had only delayed the explosion. TAEHYUNG slowly turned toward JIMIN. "The final report contained a name." JIMIN felt his stomach tighten. A name, another name, everything seemed to lead back to names. Hidden names, missing names, dangerous names. "Whose name?" JIMIN asked quietly. TAEHYUNG swallowed hard. Then he answered, "Yours." The room immediately went silent. JIMIN stared at him. "What?" TAEHYUNG nodded slowly. "Your name was listed as the final connection." Nobody moved, nobody breathed. JUNGKOOK looked away. RM closed his eyes. Jin rubbed his face. Suga stared at the floor. J-Hope looked genuinely miserable. Every reaction confirmed the same thing they already knew. "Connection to what?" JIMIN whispered. TAEHYUNG's answer came quietly. "To the person funding the entire operation." The room exploded into silence. JIMIN felt his heart stop. Funding, not running, funding, which meant there was someone even higher, someone with money, resources, influence, someone powerful enough to sustain years of surveillance, years of tracking, years of hidden investigations, and somehow his own name had become connected to them. "No," JIMIN shook his head immediately. "That's impossible." "We know," TAEHYUNG said. "That's why nobody believed it." Another silence followed. Then TAEHYUNG added the sentence that changed everything once again. "Until the last piece of evidence appeared." Every member froze. JUNGKOOK immediately looked toward him. "Don't." TAEHYUNG looked back. "It's over." TAEHYUNG. "It's over, JUNGKOOK." The room became unbearably tense. JIMIN looked between them. "What evidence?" Nobody answered. Then TAEHYUNG slowly reached into his pocket. Every member froze. Even the manager looked surprised. TAEHYUNG pulled out a small folded piece of paper. worn. Creased, old, something he had clearly carried for a long time. "This," Taehyung said quietly. Nobody moved, nobody breathed, then he slowly unfolded it. The paper contained only a few lines of text, a few lines that had apparently terrified everyone who read them. JIMIN stared at it. JUNGKOOK looked completely defeated. RM looked alarmed. Suga immediately stood up. Jin whispered something under his breath. J-Hope looked away. Then Taehyung finally lifted his eyes toward JIMIN and said, "The reason everyone was so afraid wasn't because of what they found." The room fell completely silent. "It was because of what this letter claims happened before any of us ever met you." And as Taehyung prepared to reveal the contents of the letter, every person in the room understood that the next few seconds would determine whether their friendship survived the truth or shattered forever. The room felt frozen in time. Nobody looked away from the folded letter in Taehyung's hands. Even the manager remained silent. For the first time all night, nobody wanted to be the person who spoke next. JIMIN stared at the paper. Such a small thing, a single piece of paper, yet somehow it had managed to create months of fear, arguments, secrets, and sleepless nights. "Read it," JIMIN said. His voice was steady, much steadier than anyone expected. Taehyung hesitated. JUNGKOOK immediately stepped forward. "Don't." Taehyung looked at him sadly. "You know I have to." "No," JUNGKOOK shook his head. "You really don't." The tension between them returned instantly. RM looked exhausted. "Both of you stop," but neither listened. Taehyung looked toward JIMIN. "After this, nothing goes back to normal." JIMIN laughed quietly. There wasn't much humor in it. Normal ended a long time ago. Nobody argued, because he was right. Taehyung lowered his eyes toward the paper. Then he began reading. The room listened in complete silence. Every word seemed heavier than the last. The letter described theories, suspicions, connections drawn between events that happened years apart. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't proof. It was an attempt to build a story around fragments of information. A dangerous story, a convincing story, and at the center of it all was JIMIN's name. When Taehyung finally reached the final paragraph, his voice became quieter. "The subject may be unaware of the connection," silence, "or maybe intentionally concealing it." The room immediately went cold. JIMIN stood motionless. Taehyung slowly lowered the letter. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then JIMIN did something nobody expected. He laughed, not angrily, not bitterly, genuinely laughed. Every member stared at him. "That's it?" JIMIN asked. Nobody answered. "This is what destroyed everyone." He pointed toward the paper. "A theory." The room remained silent. JIMIN shook his head in disbelief. "There's no evidence." RM slowly nodded. "That's what some of us said." "Some?" JIMIN asked. RM glanced toward the others. Not everyone agreed. JUNGKOOK finally spoke. "I didn't." Everyone turned toward him. JUNGKOOK looked directly at JIMIN. "Because the theory wasn't what scared me." Silence followed. "Then what did?" JIMIN asked. JUNGKOOK took a deep breath. "The people who believed it." The room froze. The answer hit harder than anyone expected. JUNGKOOK continued. "The letter wasn't dangerous." His eyes moved toward the manager. "The reaction to it was..." Nobody interrupted. "Once people started believing the story, they stopped looking for facts." Another pause. "They started looking for confirmation." The manager's smile disappeared. RM slowly folded his arms. Suga nodded once. Even Jin seemed to understand. JIMIN stared at JUNGKOOK. "So you spent months trying to prove it wrong." JUNGKOOK looked away briefly, then nodded. "Every day." Silence filled the room. Suddenly countless pieces of the puzzle finally connected. The late nights, the missing sleep, the obsession, the arguments. JUNGKOOK hadn't been chasing JIMIN. He had been chasing a lie before it became something worse. Taehyung sat down heavily. "And I made it worse." Nobody disagreed. Taehyung laughed bitterly. "I kept digging." His voice sounded exhausted. "Every time I found something that didn't fit the theory, I ignored it." The guilt in his face was obvious. "Because I thought there had to be a bigger answer." RM closed his eyes. "We all made mistakes." Then something unexpected happened. The manager suddenly spoke. "No." Every eye turned toward him. His expression had changed completely. The confidence was gone. The amusement was gone. "The mistake wasn't the investigation." Silence. "The mistake was letting fear make decisions." Nobody spoke. Even JUNGKOOK remained quiet. The manager looked around the room. "Every one of you became so afraid of what might be true that you forgot to ask what actually was true." The words landed heavily, because nobody could completely deny them. Months of suspicion had poisoned everything. Trust, friendship, loyalty. Every relationship inside the group had suffered. JIMIN slowly looked around the room. He saw regret everywhere. RM regretting the secrets, Jin regretting the silence, Suga regretting the compromises, J-Hope regretting the distance. TAEHYUNG regretting the obsession, JUNGKOOK regretting the burden he carried alone, and for the first time all night, JIMIN realized something. The real damage wasn't the investigation. The real damage was what it turned them into. Then JUNGKOOK finally looked at him and quietly said, "I never cared whether the theory was true." The room fell silent. JIMIN frowned. "Then why keep going?" JUNGKOOK's answer came immediately. "Because someone was using it to get closer to you." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. JUNGKOOK's eyes never left Jimin's, and that part was real. The atmosphere instantly changed again, because despite everything they had uncovered, despite every misunderstanding and false lead, one fact remained. Someone had still been watching. Someone had still been following. Someone had still been manipulating events from the shadows. The theory might have been wrong. The conclusions might have been wrong, but the threat had always been real. And as that realization settled across the room, a new question emerged. If the entire investigation had been built on a false story, then who benefited most from keeping everyone distracted while the real danger remained hidden? Nobody answered JUNGKOOK's question. The room remained completely silent. If the investigation had been built around a false theory, then somebody had wanted it that way. Somebody had benefited while everyone argued, doubted each other, and chased the wrong answers. Jimin slowly looked around the room. For the first time all night, he wasn't angry. He was tired. Tired of secrets. Tired of theories. Tired of watching people he trusted tear themselves apart. "Enough," he finally said. His voice wasn't loud, but it immediately stopped every conversation. Everyone turned toward him. "I don't care about the theory anymore." Nobody interrupted. "I don't care about the rumors." He looked directly at the manager. "And I don't care who wanted me to believe them." The room fell silent again. Then Jimin slowly turned toward the members. One by one, RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, TAEHYUNG, finally JUNGKOOK. "The only thing I care about is why nobody trusted me enough to tell me the truth." That question hurt more than any report ever could. Nobody had an answer ready, because deep down they all knew he was right. RM stepped forward first. "We failed you." The confession came quietly, honestly. "We thought protecting you meant carrying everything ourselves." Jin nodded slowly. "We were wrong." Suga sighed heavily. "By the time we realized that, things were already out of control." J-Hope looked down. "And every secret created another secret." TAEHYUNG's eyes filled with guilt. "I'm sorry." The words sounded genuine, painful, real. Then everyone's attention shifted toward JUNGKOOK, the one person who had carried the investigation further than anyone else, the one person who had risked the most. JUNGKOOK remained silent for several seconds. Then he finally spoke. "I should have told you from the beginning." Jimin stared at him. JUNGKOOK looked exhausted, like a person who hadn't allowed himself to rest in months. "I kept thinking I'd find the final answer first." His voice cracked slightly. "Something that would make everything make sense." Silence followed, but there was never a final answer. Nobody moved. JUNGKOOK laughed bitterly. "Just more questions." The room remained still. Then Jimin slowly stepped toward him. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. The tension that had existed between them all night finally reached its end. JUNGKOOK looked away. "You should be angry." Jimin shook his head. "I was." JUNGKOOK looked surprised. Jimin continued. "But not anymore." Silence. "Because now I understand something." The room listened carefully. "You weren't trying to control my life." His eyes remained fixed on JUNGKOOK. "You were scared." JUNGKOOK froze. Nobody spoke. Then Jimin quietly added, "And you carried that fear alone for too long." The words hit harder than any accusation. JUNGKOOK lowered his head. For the first time all night, he had no response. No defense. No explanation, just silence. Then Jimin did something nobody expected. He placed a hand on JUNGKOOK's shoulder. The room froze. Months of tension seemed to crack in a single moment, not disappear, but crack, enough for light to finally get through. RM looked relieved. Jin smiled faintly. Suga exhaled. J-Hope closed his eyes. TAEHYUNG looked seconds away from crying. Even the manager remained silent. Then Jimin turned toward everyone. "No more secrets." Nobody argued. "No more deciding what I can or can't handle." RM nodded immediately. "Agreed. No more investigations unless we do it together." Suga nodded. Jin nodded. J-Hope nodded. TAEHYUNG nodded. Finally JUNGKOOK nodded too. The room felt different now. Not healed, not yet, but honest for the first time in months. Then the manager quietly walked toward the laptop. Nobody stopped him. He looked at the files covering the screen, years of reports, years of fear, years of assumptions. Then he closed every folder, one by one. The screen went dark. The investigation was over. The theories were over. The lies were over, or at least they should have been. Members left the practice room together just before sunrise. Nobody said much. They were exhausted, emotionally drained, ready to leave the nightmare behind. For the first time in months, it felt like they finally could. The files were gone, the investigation had ended. The truth, however imperfect, had finally come out. JIMIN walked beside JUNGKOOK in silence. Neither knew exactly what to say next. But for the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like distance. It felt like understanding. As they reached the parking area, RM's phone suddenly vibrated. Once, then again, then again. The notifications wouldn't stop. Everyone froze. RM slowly looked down at the screen. His face immediately lost color. RM, Jin asked. No answer. RM stared at the message, then silently handed the phone to JUNGKOOK. JUNGKOOK read it. His expression changed instantly. Every trace of relief disappeared. JIMIN felt his stomach tighten. What is it? Nobody answered. Then JUNGKOOK slowly turned the screen toward him. A new email had arrived less than 2 minutes ago. No sender name, no identification, just a single attachment. One video file. Beneath it was a message containing only 9 words. You finally found the wrong truth. Start again. And as JUNGKOOK opened the attachment, every member realized the nightmare they thought had ended might only have been the beginning.